Okay, welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN. Daishian Miller here from Warrior Concepts, but of course, most of you already know that. Readjust my camera here a little bit. Awesome. Sporting my Bujinkan India t-shirt for this episode, which actually, believe it or not, I was surprised the other day. It's 10 years old. So it was gifted to me by a group from Bujinkan India that was in Japan that year training, and I appreciate it. It's still in great shape. Anyway, so during this episode, we're going to take a look at something that seems, I don't know, in the West, maybe a little bit alien, maybe a little bit contradictory, but I'm pulling at least part of this lesson out of the book by Hatsumi Sensei, Ninpo Wisdom for Life. This was edited by Joe Maratonio of the New York Budo, I think. I can't remember the exact name of the dojo, and I apologize, Joe, if you're ever listening to this or watching this. I thought at some point this was actually originally published under a different name, but as I've been leafing through this, I don't know that that I found it. But anyway, so we're going to pull not a quote, but a little passage here or there out of this for the moment, for this episode, and I want to take a look at a correlation between a willingness to get cut and someone's level of what Hatsumi Sensei has often called guts, and someone's ability to succeed and to be a benefit to society, which all seems kind of, I don't know, thrown together and mismatched, but it's not, I promise. So anyway, we'll dive into that as soon as we get back. So let's go ahead and do that.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio.
All right, welcome. So for those of you just signing in and you weren't on for the, what we call that, preface, preamble, prelude, anyway. So I'm basing a little bit of this from rereading, rereading. Every once in a while, I pull a book from the shelf and go into it again, because every time, if we're working on things, right, every time we reread something and go into it, at least I know I do, and my teachers have told me that they do as well, we tend to see something we might have missed before, or things take on a new meaning, right? There's a different depth to them. And so that's what happened this time. I was going through one of the sections. Again, this is called Ninpo Wisdom for Life. This was published, or at least re-edited, and came out in 1998, 99, something like that, right? So originally, I was going to do something on nage, right, throwing, but something else caught my eye, and it is centered around this idea of cutting and getting cut, right? There's a section in here. For those of you who have the book, right, it starts on page 79. For those who do not, I'm not going to hold it up. You have to trust me. Anyway, Hatsumi Sensei talks about how in Kenpo, right, the way of the sword, there is a training method called Tameshigiri. We know this, right? Test cutting. Sometimes, right, this was done historically using people, right? They would go to a prison or grab some prisoners, and let's say a swordsmith made a new sword, and so swords are typically designated uh, inin, ninin, sanin, I think, right? But it's one person, two person, three person, and then the blade gets stamped. Well, anybody ever wonder like how they came up with that? If it was just a weight or a design, or well, we just know that swords like this tend to. Yeah, no, they would take three prisoners and tie them together and do a test cut, and the number of bodies that it went through, that was the designation of the sword. So if it only went through one, then it was a one person sword. Even if it nicked or partially went into the second one, didn't count. Right? Went through two, went through three, all three, then three person sword. But again, we can also cut a bunch of straw. Right? They have these. They're called tatami omote. Right? So the tatami skins, the outer layer of tatami mats that are made in Japan. Most people have trained on them, unless you've gone to Sumaya Sensei's dojo or some of the other folks who still use traditional tatami. You're training on something that has kind of a plastic vinyl wrapping on the outside, and then there's this dense commercialized kind of material on the inside. But tatami are made up of two parts. There's this woven kind of filler um, that's that's the mat itself, and then it's wrapped in this woven grass skin and stitched in place and whatnot. And then to make it last longer, once or twice a year, they peel off this skin, which would have been worn down and it's starting to expose the underside and whatnot. Peel all this stuff off, kind of toss it in the corner or outside or whatever, and then reskin the tatami and then put things back out, right? And so the traditional targets that we often see that are these uh, coiled mat materials, right? A lot of times when you buy them commercially, right, they're the brand new things, right? It's same thing, tatami skin. Um, but to save money, right, that's a type of recycling. What they would do is take these old tatami skin and wrap them and or roll them, right, tie them off. There's a whole process, right? Often they're soaked in water for a day or three, so they swell up and whatnot, and then they're rolled to different diameters, right? What you're really looking at is arm or thigh or those kind of, and sometimes it's not like the whole thing. You just kind of bundle two or three or four, whatever, together. But then it's for sword cutting practice, right? So anyway, Tameshi Giri. In karate, we have what is known as Tameshi Wadi, right? Where you're breaking a pile of tiles, right? That's kind of where that comes from. But the whole idea here, it's a testing of the weapon, right? Whether it's a fist or a sword or whatever, right? So what Hatsumi Sensei goes on to say is, if you think this is the ultimate technique of cutting or breaking, then you are a total novice in the world of Budo, because this is only one of many ways to cut in Budo. And then he goes on to talk about something that went on in class that had to do with bow, staff, and whatnot. But either way, he kind of transitions into talking about this one day in the dojo doing some taijutsu training. He said, I let the deshi students do the Keiko of Senbon Mushadori. Senbon, not Senban. Okay? Be careful, lackadaisical English speakers, right? They're not the same. That phrase that we use in English, right? Close enough for government work. Yeah, no. Okay. Senbon is like 1,000. Yeah, 1,000. right? Mushadori, warrior catch. So senbon mushadori, 1,000 warrior catch. It's redundancy practice, right? So he says everyone was doing this keiko. Keiko is it can be translated as old ways. It can be translated as thinking deeply on lessons, or specifically like the past. Okay, if anybody has ever encountered the alternate name for a dolgi, right? Dolgi, martial arts uniform for wear in the dojo. An alternate name is keikogi, right? Keikogi, right? Not, if anybody speaks Korean, I'm not saying keikogi, right? We're not, or kegogi, right? Not dog meat, right? Keiko, right? Keikogi. Gi is the uniform, right? Keiko is the study of old ways. And when I say study, I mean like deep contemplation of. Okay? Um, so, uh, so everybody was doing this Keiko correctly, even the beginner students. In the meantime, when they got tired, some started to cut corners. Then I gave them kiai. After most of them gave up, long before reaching 1,000, uh, my only foreign student was still doing Keiko. Right? He was still doing it correctly, the way it was supposed to be done, right? Not showing any tiredness at all. He did not become tired because he was doing Keiko properly without excessive power, since he had dislocated his elbow during an earlier lesson. I remember this was written in 98, 99. So I don't know when before the writing of this, this would have taken place, but how do I say this nicely? This was before soft training, right? This was before, when I say soft training, I mean what people think of now. Soft training to us back in the day was still slow training, but there was the recognition that a properly applied technique, even slowly, hurt and could cause damage to you, to your partner, whatever. Okay. Where the leaning into the new stage or phase of soft training came in, and this belief that it shouldn't hurt, right, came out of something Hatsumi Sensei taught on at the Princeton Taikai, where he said changes were needed because people didn't understand the art, right? Even people that came from other martial arts, they didn't understand what we were doing, and so they were applying way too much power, right? It just was not connecting, and so they were injuring themselves, they were injuring other people, that kind of thing. But the soft training was still not supposed to be like a no one's supposed to feel pain, right? um, I don't know where that came. Well, I have an idea of where it came from. My belief is that because Hatsumi Sensei and Japanese teachers, remember these are native Japanese speakers, many know English, or many are speaking in a way where a translator is trying to get this point across, but sometimes it's just a literal translation. Okay. And I believe that what was being translated was don't hurt your partner. Okay. Don't try to hurt your partner. That's what it was. Don't try to hurt your partner. And I believe that that was equated with the feeling of pain. Like, don't hurt your partner. Don't make them feel an owie. Okay. But that's not what was being conveyed. What was being conveyed was don't try to hurt your partner. You don't have to try to hurt your partner. A properly applied technique will do the damage all by itself. The reason why we're training slowly, a couple of different reasons. One, it's a safety mechanism, because a properly applied technique hurts, damages, breaks things. It's what it's designed to do. Okay. The way most people translate soft training today would be like buying a tool from the store to come home, and you try to use it and it just like won't even turn the screw or the nut or whatever, because it's soft and it'll collapse, right? So it doesn't produce the result. Okay. So it's a safety mechanism. The other reason behind soft training was the focus is on precision and sensitivity and feeling pressure, energy, effort, those kind of things. Um, and the fact that we don't have to train fast or strong to be fast or strong in a violent encounter. This is a big misnomer that most people have. And once we understand that under the adrenal response, we will be as strong as we can be and we will be as fast as we can be. We now recognize that we don't have to train for strength. We have to train for positioning, leverage, those kind of things, right? And we have to train for timing. Right? We have to train for like reaction time, syncing. What's the best time for this weapon or fist or whatever to touch that particular target in the flow of things? It's not the same, right? I know it feels like, right, we're stronger, we're doing work and all that. But one of the first lessons I learned as a white belt, so we're talking 1980, 81, something like that, was that in this art, right? This art by its very nature is designed to be effective when the odds are against us, not when it's a fair fight, not when we're the bigger army, right? When we're outgunned. Okay? Survival by its very nature means that we're dealing with something that's supposed to kill us. We're supposed to lose. Okay? So if we're already the bigger or the faster person, that's not a survival situation. It's just not, right? So we have to be able to apply things in a way where what we do neutralizes that strength or speed or we're outnumbered or whatever, that kind of problem, right? It's not the same. Okay? And so the idea of using less to produce more, right, is really where things are going. Okay. So anyway, so again, they're working on the traditional technique, right? The classical way things are done, right? This Keiko. So where he's going with this thing here, where the student who's doing it properly is able to do it again and again and again and not wear out, not be exhausted. Did I even point that one part out? Yeah. So in the meantime, when a lot of students were getting tired, some actually started to cut corners. Okay. So they would do it faster, they would do it harder, they would try to catch their partner sooner, whatever, because they're worn out, right? So he says this example shows you that Keiko will be totally ineffective when you try too hard to cut or to win. Therefore, you end up not getting the knack of Keiko. You're not getting the knack of what the past masters passed down. Okay? So once you've acquired this knack, you don't have to do Keiko 1,000 times. Okay? Now, often people hear that kind of thing and then they make the assumption that they have it, so therefore they don't have to do the work anymore. He says, in addition, when you're preoccupied with the act of cutting, like cutting firewood, right, you cannot develop as budoka at all, right? If anybody's ever cut firewood, you know what I'm talking about, right? This big old, you're trying to like split the log, one cut with the axe, that kind of thing, right? And it's just it's about it's all wrapped around this clean cut, right? But there's all this effort that's put into it, right? It tells a little story about somebody else. As a matter of fact, I'll share this. He said, I once heard Takamasa Sensei say that when his student Akimoto died, Takamasa Sensei said, "I wish I could have died instead of him." Right? And so Hatsumi Sensei is pointing out this indicates that a warrior should have the inclination to be cut instead of cutting others. Therefore, every negative feeling, hatred, or regret should be cleared from your mind. Once you gain the willingness to be cut, you can understand a phrase like put up with shame and put away vengeance easily. This relates to feeding other people, even when you're hungry. The feeling of harakiri, this is a play on words, uh, between suicide for the sake of saving lives and giving up food when you're hungry. There's a little, it's a cultural thing, right? Um, he said, man should live with a willingness to be cut. He will naturally become a vital person in society and will learn to live more happily by winning without drawing the sword, cutting, or killing people. Yeah, I'll add this one as well. He said, some friend told me that I have a strong tendency to become a religious person. I answered, it goes without saying, I have that quality in me. We have a law called Jinbujin Satsunoho, which means God and warriors never kill except when unavoidable. That's because we gain the mind of Shumon, religion, through mastering Budo. We are supposed to tend this religious nature with Budo. So anyway, I'll come back to a couple. There's another one I want to jump in here that has to do with perseverance, but often this can really throw folks off. That like I'm supposed to be willing to get cut before I want to cut somebody else. We'll talk about that as we move into this. I've got this kind of broken down into a couple of levels, but there's a couple of important points that popped out here. One, just this general willingness to be cut before cutting others. And I'd mentioned it earlier, right? Having to do with guts. But also there's this point that he made that had to do with this type of person is not just vital for society, but they become vital, right? They become really important. Okay. And not like, I mean, it can be notoriety, but they become vital and important as in necessary, right? They become more successful and in ways that is very beneficial to others. Okay. Definitely want to lean into that. Okay. Because I think that's one, at least here in the West, this idea of success or this idea of someone who sets out to do something that's great or that's a benefit to others can often set them up as a target to other people. And then there's this whole other kind of philosophical religious side. And again, when I say religion, when Hatsumi Sensei is talking about religion, we're not talking about necessarily like the organized form or any specific one, right? It's about becoming more of a spiritual, righteous, compassionate person. So anyway, as I'm pulling up my notes here, I'll turn this over to James, see if anybody's checked in, said, hey, who do we need to recognize? Here's James.
So far, Dave and Maui have checked in.
Awesome.
So good evening.
Good evening. All right. Awesome. Okay. So obviously, if you caught the title of this when I sent out all the emails, or if you're on the email list, or you caught any of the social posts, right? So the title for this episode is "The Courage to Be Cut," and so what we're leaning into is power, restraint, and how this is connected to the warrior's path. Okay. So the first thing I really need to kind of open with to set the tone on this is that this is not about glorifying pain. This is not, it's not about martyrdom, those kind of things, right? This is about understanding the kind of person you must become to make a real difference in the world, okay? In your world. In Tendai Mikyo, the branch of Mikyo in Japan that I became an initiated lay teacher in, there's a saying, right, that one should light up one's own little corner of the world, right? And the implication behind that is that if we all did that, if we stopped worrying about what everybody else was doing, right, if we stopped judging and condemning and whatever, right, everybody that wasn't doing it our way, and we focused on lighting up our own little corner of the world, then by default, every little corner of the world would be lit up. Even if only a third of us, a quarter of us, a fifth of us did that, right? Because light spreads. The world would be a pretty bright place. But think about how bright your own little corner of the world would be if we just spent the time focusing on the condition of our own home, our own backyard, our own neighborhood block, that kind of thing, right? There's a quote that I have from Hatsumi Sensei on this concept, right? And it just kind of sums this whole thing up, right? The man who is willing to be cut can do great things in society, okay? But what are we talking about with this being willing to be cut, right? What's the true meaning behind this, right? So it's not just about being cut. This is kind of is along the same lines as if we're talking about mutodori, right? Mutodori, most people understand, right? It's unarmed against a sword. No, mutodori literally means no blade catch, no blade seizure. And so conventionally, it seems to just point to he's armed, he's got a weapon, and I don't, right? But again, in ninjutsu, as Takamatsu Sensei has passed it down, as Hatsumi Sensei has passed it down, as is seen in many of the scrolls, there's always a deeper meaning, right? So there's this surface level meaning, and this is the problem with people trying to learn on their own. It's not that they can't learn something, right? But if they think this is like going to a discount store to buy something and believing that what you're buying is of the same quality as the higher priced item. They just overcharge for it, right? They're just charging for the brand. Maybe, but it's been my experience that if I buy the cheap version, and sometimes I had to, right? Sometimes I still have to. Sometimes it's an expedient, right? When it comes to tools, right? Some people are all about like the high end tools and whatnot, but they work with their tools all the time, so they should drop some money on their tools. The tools I buy, shit. If I lost it, if I broke it, whatever, I just go to the store and buy another low cost one because I really don't need them all that often. I don't do my own stuff that often. I'm trust me, when it comes to mechanical items or other things in my life, not that mechanically inclined. When it comes to the human body, very mechanically inclined. Okay, so we all have our specializations, which is what's cool about having a successful martial arts academy. What I mean by that, right? The bigger the dojo, not facility wise, the bigger the dojo is in the student body, the more the bigger of a network I have of people with skills. But then you know what? The bigger the network any given student has with skills. So I get it. Some people want to lean into, I just want to have one student. If I just have like 2 or 3 students that are like really, really serious, and then they're always like running through students because attrition's a bitch, right? Normal drop off. But the bigger the dojo, the more of a ninja network any given person within the dojo has. So I don't have to be mechanically inclined. I just, I treat my students well, and they help. Sometimes it's at a fee. Sometimes it's because I like sensei, whatever, right? But there's this with mutodori, right? Let's just get back to mutodori here. It implies that you're outgunned, right? It implies that there is such a severe disconnect or unbalance. Okay, so while mutodori literally, right, says, right, without blade, right, so it implies what? right? It literally points to he has a blade, I don't, or he has a formidable weapon. It'd be really nice if I had a blade. Well, I don't. Right? What it's really pointing to is I might have a weapon, but it's smaller than his, or he has an edged weapon and I have a staff weapon, or whatever. There's an imbalance, right? And so this is that way, right? This be willing to be cut, right? Is not just about being cut, right? It's also being willing to take a hit, right? Before you strike, right? Instead of the uh, what's that thing from Karate Kid from a bunch of years ago, right? Strike first, strike hard, Cobra Kai, that kind of thing, right? And but if you understand the reason that people do that and how it's a defense mechanism, right? Everything changes. Okay. But even the idea of being willing to get hit, right? I spent a lot of time there with that Mutodori, because not only is it not just about uh, I don't have a weapon, he does. It's not just about blades. I could have a blade, but whatever he has is bigger, right? I have a pistol and he has a tank, whatever, right? It's not just about taking a hit physically. It's also being willing to take a hit emotionally, right? Uh, Mentally, right? Somebody attacking or condemning your intellect, professionally, financially, right? Um, and being able to do things in a way that not only overcomes the disadvantage, but put you on top, right? Um, so this really leans into not acting or not reacting out of fear, out of ego, out of impulse, right? Habitual tendencies, right? Back in the day, computers were much newer back then. For anybody that's my age, you remember that keyboards were more like electric typewriters, and even if it wasn't electric, it had the big fat keys like that. And when you pressed, right, they made a resounding click, right? And then everything was stored on like reel to reel tape, right? For those of you who don't know what that is, just Google it, right? So, but if you see any of the old sci-fi movies or whatever, right, somebody click a couple of buttons and then they would cut the camera over to these big freaking things that look like cabinets that had this magnetic tape on it that would reel. But when these things spun, they would make this whirring sound, right? So way back in the early 80s, when we would talk about this instinctive, impulsive, habitual, less than mindful response, we would call it a click whir response. What that means is something or somebody would push our button, and we only had one way of dealing with things, right? The computer would call up the subroutine, which is, right, that button was pushed, I do this. Someone calls my mom a name, I punch him in the throat, whatever. Okay. Um, it's not reacting out of fear. It's not reacting out of ego. It's these things, right? It's not about passivity. It's not about being passive. Okay. Like often people will see the passage from the Bible, right? A man strikes you on one cheek, right? Turn the other cheek toward him, and different translations. I have found historical references that had nothing to do with passivity. It had to do with turning away the injury so that he couldn't hit that again and cause greater damage. Okay. I found it very interesting that people will talk about passivity. Meanwhile, there's at least one story that I can think of off the top of my head where one of the disciples, when the group, surrounding Jesus, was approached by a soldier, and he went to draw a sword. And as a matter of fact, he did draw a sword and lopped off the ear of the soldier. This whole story wrapped around that. Okay. This is all about passivity. Why are these religious dudes armed? Or at least one of them was. Okay. Anyway, it could have been just because there were wild animals around. Anyway, so it's not about passivity, right? It's about restraint and timing, right? The world doesn't need more people who can attack. Shit, human beings are born able to attack. Just watch little kids, right? They're more than willing to slap somebody to get a toy. The other kid took their toy, whatever. Okay, throwing themselves on the floor and beating the carpet or whatever because they're having a temper tantrum, screaming at their parents. We're born aggressive. Okay, we don't need more people who can attack. Right, the world needs more people who know when not to. Right? Who have the ability to. Okay? And this really plays into that. There's a quote from a couple of different places, just kind of translated differently, right? That only those who are capable of extreme violence are able to choose peace. Right? Someone who's not capable of violence and they live as a peaceful person, they haven't chosen peace. They have no other choice. Okay. They're harmless and they're living peacefully, hoping that that's the thing that gets other people to treat them the same way. I get it. It's a good tool. Right? But choice requires at least two options. Right. So, and again, it's not just that we're not going to. Okay. It's when is it the right answer? When is it not the right answer? In a James, was it maybe a private lesson or maybe it was a KUDEN? Not somehow I'm thinking that not too long ago I was discussing not just knowing how to do a technique and what kind of an attack that would slip in on well and things like that, but also knowing when not to do any given technique, when that technique would be the worst freaking thing you could ever attempt to do. Was that a KUDEN? Do you remember? I had a private class with a student earlier, and she was talking about whether she's on for a live class or not, catching up on KUDEN, catching up on Whiteboard Wednesday or whatever. I'm in your ear almost every day. But anyway, do you remember what I'm talking about?
I remember that. I don't remember. I feel like it was in a class.
It may have come up in a class. It may have been one of the Shinobi Kai classes or something like that, because again, one of the things that Hatsumi Sensei was alluding to with the students wearing themselves out was often students, they have bits and pieces of the technique, but not the full thing. Like they'll, and I'm guilty of this, back in the day as well. So with age comes experience, and with getting shit wrong and being told no often enough, you start to look for other things. But often, leading with beginner mind, a student will watch what the teacher does with their arm. Like, okay, threw his arm over the other guy's arm, and he just kind of like hugged it, and it made the arm bend, and this mushadori ended up on him. Yeah, kinda. Right. But what was his body's relative position to the opponent's arm that this mushadori is being applied to? What is the relative position of the opponent's upper arm to the torso, more specifically to the alignment of the two shoulders? Right. Just it's not the same. Okay. So when's the best time to apply it? When's the best time to throw your arm over? When's the best time to catch things? Those kind of things, right? So the key that I'm really trying to point to here or give you, right, is that a person who can endure without flinching, right, has more power than one who attacks out of fear. Right? I often talk about collateral damage. Whether I'm teaching in class or I'm consulting for a corporation, sometimes one of the hurdles that I have to get over, like they called me in to at least discuss the possibility of putting training or things in place that would handle workplace violence issues. And one of the hurdles that I often have to get over or help them get over is uh, this this belief that if we train their people in self-defense tactics uh, or in response tactics, that they're going to have a bigger problem with violence because now everybody's trained in violence. But rarely, if ever, is that the case, right? Um, it's the untrained person who not only can everything will just like fall apart, right? Gets damaged more, but they often, more often than not, cause more damage because know how to they don't know how to manage the effort, right? It's kind of like the big kid who doesn't know how strong he is, and so just playing around with other kids and ends up hurting them. Just just doesn't know. Okay, but just at a surface level, this being willing to be cut has to do with like strength and fortitude, right? It's not passive. It's about when, right? When will I do things? But there's way more to it than this, right? It's this whole idea uh, of if I'm willing to take the shot, and I've taken shots. That's part of what training is all about, right? People avoid having techniques done to them, but they certainly like applying the techniques. They know what level of damage or pain or whatever any given technique produces. And so what ends up happening is they develop a sense akin to like a use of force, right? So they're not going to apply something that overdoes it, but they're also not going to apply something that's too little for this given situation. Okay. Which is really important in today's world, right? Ancient Japan, you bump into a samurai, he can take your head off because, there was just status in society. In today's world, with the way the laws are and whatnot, you really got to be careful with use of force. And so it's not as simple as just running around the world chanting the mantra, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. It's not that simple. Okay. Because I would ask if your willingness to be tried by 12 also includes being willing to be ass raped by 10 in the prison shower. Because you go in as a tough guy, shit can happen, right? I didn't mean that to be a pun, but either way, in my head at that moment, it sounded like one. Anyway, James, we have any questions or comments at the moment regarding anything I just covered? You're not laughing, so I guess that wasn't as funny as I thought it might have been.
Just that Chris McLaurin said he's
Awesome.
here, and Jimmy said
Konbanwa, Jimmy-san. Chris, how are the knees? I'm just trying to plan my week. See how many classes I need to cover. Knees, kidneys, sugar level knees. Some people beat themselves up more than I do. But I want to make sure you're okay when I beat you up in class. Anyway, cool. All right, so let me just jump back to this. Let's see, where are my notes? Oh, they're over there, different place. Okay, so let's take a look at this this idea of power with restraint, and how, well, that's part of this idea of being a benefit to society. Okay. But I'm going to go deeper into that than just like I've got this Omote lesson kind of penned out, but the more I thought about this and let it stew over the day, the more we need to look at an UDA kind of thing that I think actually kind of gets in the way more often for a lot of folks. Okay. So let's start with the omote side. Okay. The warrior who waits, who protects, who endures first creates trust. Okay. Because a lot of folks, and I've mentioned this in the past, a lot of folks appreciate the fact that their friend or coworker or whatever, right, has some skills, right, and they feel all confident about it. But it turns into something different if that person, right, who's confident but also looking to be trusted and making people feel safe and whatnot, if the way they describe things, if the way they talk about things, right, um, undoes all that. Okay. So it's one thing, for them to know that you've got a black belt or you've got these skills and whatever. That's cool. Right. But if every time we get flustered or frustrated, right? Oh, God, I just want to headbutt somebody in the face or whatever it is, right? Or there's a meltdown every time things don't go the right way, right? And uh, person leads toward a certain boiling point, right? It it undoes the confidence that people have in us because now they're not sure, right? Skills coupled with an inability to maintain control and endure uh, hardship, right? See, because those people know how they get, right? And they don't have any skills, but we do. And that becomes problematic, right? That induces more fear, concern, anxiety, those kind of things. But the first thing that goes is trust, okay? The more we're able to handle hardship, somebody yelling at us or whatever, and, you know, we can walk away and we're not taking frustration or whatever out on other people, right? We're not, whether they're idle or not. Well, it's just the way people talk. Yeah, no, when you can back it up, like if you own a weapon and say I'm going to shoot somebody, that comes across very different than not having a weapon and saying you're going to shoot somebody. Okay, if you don't have any martial arts skills or fight skills, um, and you look at somebody and go, oh, dude, one of these days, right? That's going to come across very, very differently than somebody who has a whole bunch of skills, right? Because, well, let's see, under the law, right? I'm a former federal police officer, right? We had to have uh, means, right? Opportunity, right? And we have to have, what's that third one? Do we know? What is that third one? James, do you know?
Means opportunity. I want to say
Yeah,
capacity.
intent. Yeah, but it's intent or shit. The regular word that's tossed around is used or whatever. But there's the intent to do it, the means, right? You have the means to do it, and all that's required then is the opportunity after that. So, but either way, so the person who develops this ability to endure, right? That focuses or has been witnessed to protect others and those kind of things, right? That even when they get flustered or these things kind of happen, right? Take a moment, breathe, that kind of thing, and then, right, they act or they go through options and then they act, right? It's very different. Okay. In a family dynamic, right? this can show up, and this could be like a group of friends as well. When I say a family, I don't necessarily mean like biological or whatever, but it shows up as strength without intimidation. Right. One of the things that really threw me off when I was in the military was uh, leaders have authority based on their position, but sometimes they would do dumbass stuff that just undermined them on a regular basis. And it was because everything was wrapped around ego. It was wrapped around rank or position. You know, a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant or whatever, right, could tell somebody that is one of their charges, right, and you should do this thing. And if that charge said why, the all the sergeant had to say was because I gave you an order to go do that thing. It's lawful, and you took an oath. They don't even have to go that far, right? But very often, what these guys would do is, that back in my day, we wore the rank on the collar, right? They'd grab their collar and shove it forward to make a point that I outrank you, so you have to listen to me. It doesn't breed trust, right? That, yes, it's true, right? But done that way, right? That's not just intimidation, but it's being an asshole. Right? It's, don't you have another way to do, because I told you to, right? Why do I have to do that? Because I told you to, or because I gave you an order, or whatever, right? Doesn't need to go beyond that. Okay. I think I might have told this group, I don't remember. At my first duty station after basic training, I ended up in South Korea. I didn't end up there. I chose it. And my first squad leader was a multi-toured former Vietnam vet. So do the math, right? I ended up in South Korea in 1981. Okay. Vietnam was over, what, 74, 75. So it hadn't been very long since he had been, shot at quite a bit and almost blown up and whatever. And while Corporal Petty, that should tell you a lot, because with all the years in training and combat and all that, or years in service and combat and whatnot, he should have been way more than a corporal. But he was past the giving a fuck level when it came to stupidity, and it backfired on him sometimes. But anyway, I remember one time we were driving on patrol around our post and whatnot, and this butter bar, the second lieutenant, is walking by. Couldn't have been that far out of college, and Corporal Petty, we were discussing things, and he was trying to train me, right? And he looks over, catches this second lieutenant out of the corner of his eye, and raises his hand to salute. And next thing you know, this lieutenant yelled something, and we didn't know if that was like somebody just got hurt, something happened or whatever. So I bring the Jeep to a halt, right? And like Corporal Petty's looking around for a scuffle, a ruckus, whatever. And this lieutenant comes walking up and goes, "Don't you owe me something?" Corporal Petty's, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Aren't you supposed to salute superior officers?" And Corporal Petty said, "With due respect, sir, I did salute you. Right? We were driving. You may have missed it, but in the driving path, I didn't see it, so it doesn't count." Corporal Petty kind of shifted in his seat, and he saluted again. Lieutenant saluted. Corporal Petty said, "Happy?" He said, "You will treat me with respect. I am an officer and a gentleman." And Corporal Petty, without breaking a beat, said, "Yes, sir, but only because Congress says so." I don't know what they say now, but on an officer's military ID card, it said, "By decree of United States Congress, the aforenamed or forenamed person is identified as," or whatever, right? An officer and a gentleman in the United States Army, right? So that's what he was alluding to, right? Because if you're throwing this around, right? One, you're not a gentleman. Two, you're an officer by rank, right? And by position. But if you're looking for respect because this is what you're hiding behind, then there's a whole bunch of different problems going on. So anyway, and this leads to the in leadership positions, right? This can appear as clarity under pressure. Anybody that's ever been um, in those kind of situations, right, where you're a special operator on a team, I was on a SWAT team. You tend to get used to shit happening, right? And the more it happens, the more it takes to break you, right? You just end up, yes, the adrenal response is happening and all that, but it's, I can't say it's like every other day, but it becomes normalized, right? And so you're just able to think more clearly, okay? Which is why when folks are training, once they get a skill down fairly decently, right? You learn a skill. I don't uke nagash, right? Throws a punch and you uke nagash, ichimonji no kata, whatever, right? Then you slowly start picking up the speed, okay? Because we want to be able to do it correctly 8 out of 10 times at least 80% full speed. Okay. Otherwise, right, we're going to have problems. Okay? Just because we can do it in the dojo with soft training doesn't mean that we can do it under pressure. Okay. We want to be able to maintain the clarity. We want to be able to know during the uke nagash or the uke uch, right? Do we have an opening so we don't just rush in there and do it because that's the thing. Now, there's safety mechanisms wired into training and all that kind of stuff. You don't do that with a training partner that can't take ukemi. As a matter of fact, in a class last week, my black belts are going to be working for a while on training from the uke side, where they're going to be practicing ukemi against these techniques. And so what I had them working on last week, Saturday, I believe, was doing a redundancy drill with ichimonji no kata. But to be able to do the drill, for those of you who are in my training, we've got 2 drills that we introduced in module 2, which are en undo, which is, it kind of looks like a zigzag drill because you're practicing ichimonji or seigan or whatever, and just doing uke nagashi with your kamae, right? You don't have to touch the arm, whatever. And so he just throws a punch, or a kick or a grab or whatever. And we're just shifting and moving and getting really, really comfortable with taking center, right? And then we have this one called en undo, which is a circular repetition drill. And that's where he throws a punch, I receive it and come in with one of my own. He receives that, comes in with one. And it's just this back and forth kind of thing. Well, what I'm introducing the black belts to is being able to do this en undo, this repetition, the circular repetition kind of thing, using the Kyon Gata. So using ichimonji, what we had was a punch came in, received it, came in with an omote shito, right? Which normally would knock this guy to the side. And then the next time we did it, next time he threw the same punch, receive it, I come in with an ura shito, which knocks him over here. What these things do, depending on where I place him, the shot that I do, when he neutralizes that, it either keeps him in the same position where he throws the same punch, or it causes him to adjust, and now the opposite side is going to come, right? So anyway, but to do that, we had to have the uke learn how to ride off the shuto. See, a really common problem mentally for a lot of students and instructors is the assumption that because the kata says that, you know, you win, that's the way the fight's going to go, or that the opponent's supposed to die at the end or get driven into the ground or whatever. Okay. But we also need to train from the uke side, and the uke side is all about what I'm covering: the willingness to take a hit. because if we don't take the hit, we don't know what the technique is supposed to do. I don't mean you're supposed to get broken, right? But we also don't, we never learn about the force of the shot, okay, and where it's sending us. So what's the ukemi? Is it a step? Is it a roll? Is it a leap? What's happening? Because if I hit laterally straight into the neck, it's going to drive the person toward their other leg. Okay. If I hit and hook behind, it's going to move them forward at a diagonal. If I strike lifting, it's going to lift them up. Right. It's very different. But this also helps the person training as the uke to recognize that sometimes you can't avoid the shot. You're going to get hit. So if all your training is about getting hit and then the fight's over, well, then you're training to lose. Just because the kata runs out doesn't mean the fight's over. Also, just because you're playing the role of the uke and he's going to do this technique to you doesn't mean that you're the bad guy. The fight could have started before the kata. And the shot that I'm throwing as the quote unquote uke in this moment in time and space could have been my follow up. And then Joe Cool Jackwagon neutralizes this thing, comes in and hits me with something else. Okay. So what I was teaching students on Saturday was we were very precise about the strikes and whatnot. So the student can learn a form of ukemi footwork because they're being driven toward the other leg. So it's going to be really difficult to pick that leg up and reposition it anywhere. So we were riding it off with yokoruki, striking and being driven over. So the trailing leg, so you end up doing this little hoppy skippy little cross step maneuver to ride off that force and that energy. And then you're coming right back in with another one. Right. And then he knocks in the other direction or whatever. So the biggest problem that the students had for that class was being willing to take the shot because, see, fear says, we're supposed to always avoid. And then what was happening was because they always avoided during those times when they're doing that, right? At this naname angle, at this 45-degree angle, 30-degree angle, whatever, right? They end up stumbling all over the place because once they take the shot, they're trying to step in a direction that they think they should be stepping in instead of paying attention to where the strike is taking them and riding it off. Right. So it took half to 3/4 of the class just to get that piece where the uke could do the yokoruki as a ukemi, as a neutralizing footwork pattern to ride things off, so that the engagement or the setup could reset and they could throw in the next shot. Right. It was it was challenging, right? But that actually, Saturday's class actually began Friday night where we were working on Hicho no Kata. And one of the drills that I had them do was doing this enundo, this redundancy drill, right? With Hicho no Kata. Partner punches, block it, kick, knock them away, comes back in, block it, kick, knock them away, block, kick, knock it away. So it's just a redundancy thing. Now, for that one, students found it easier because they were being knocked away at this naname angle. So people found it easier to do that because they could do it from memory. They could do the habitual click whir response. But when they were being knocked in a direction that should have knocked them down based on the way the kata is built, right, takes you off the outside edge of your foot. And so the rolling that's done in the beginner level of training when you're knocked off that foot is a way to save yourself from a crash and burn scenario. But what we were doing from a black belt level was riding it off to where you were getting hit, but not hard enough to knock you off your feet. We were riding with it, but at the same time needing a different kind of maneuver. Anyway, different stuff, right? So again, in conflict, acting only when it serves the greater good, right? So we get that omote stuff, okay? And so I don't know. There's a quote that kind of leads into that as well. The dangerous man who chooses peace gives peace meaning, right? This is contrasted with one who claims peace but panics under pressure, right? People like to walk around and show a face because they're playing guru, they're playing master, they're playing warrior, but they just fucking wig out at the first sign that things aren't going to go their way, or the partner hit them a little too hard. I mean, the number of martial arts schools I've been in where somebody threatens to take the fight outside after class because their partner hit them too hard, or they threw them wrong when really the person who's pissed off didn't pay attention to the direction of the throw, and they fucking crashed and burned. Right. So UK was, or the person doing the throw was doing it right, just not freaking paying attention. Or, I want to train and I want to be able to hurt other people, but like, I don't want to get hurt myself. Okay. So anyway, so this is kind of the omote of things, right? The Uda that's in here, okay, is wrapped around the idea that you can't do anything of significance without drawing the assholes out of the woodwork. Okay. And so I believe that is in the nature of most people. Okay. And this contradicts warriorship. It is in the nature of most people to hide among the masses. That's why most people, I don't like trouble. I don't want to rock the boat. I know he did something, but I'm not going to say anything because I'm avoiding conflict. People hide. It is in the DNA of the masses to hide within the masses, to not stand out. Okay. Because if you stand out, you draw everything from lightning bolts to arrows to whatever, right? The other guy that wants to be king of the mountain. Okay. So the Oda on this side, to be a benefit to society, to do something that helps a lot of people, to stand out. Oh, I don't know. Let's see. To have over, what do I have, James? Over 600 articles out there in the world, books, how many videos, those kind of things, right? You better be willing to take a hit because the asshats come out of the woodwork. Okay? And so while I appreciate every once in a while, I'll see, a comment by somebody that like, dude, kudos to you. I don't know anything about this stuff, or, whatever, right? Kudos to you just for taking all the shit. To Hatsumi Sensei's statement where somebody said, you seem like you have, the tendency to being a religious person. And he said, that goes without saying, right? Because proper practice leads in a certain direction, right? When this person says, you seem like you must be okay with all this shit that comes out. Yeah, I have to be. Anybody who is doing anything of significance, okay? I don't care which side of a political fence, religious fence, whatever you are on, okay? People who are attacking are trying to break the will of the person who is doing what they're doing. You don't have to agree with it. But as a warrior, you might want to appreciate the fortitude that it takes when we all know that most people, including a good percentage of those of us who I'm including myself in here, so it softens things. Imagine ourselves to be a warrior, but already know in our heart of hearts. We might even have said it silently to ourselves. Dude, if that were me, I'd have quit a long time ago. I wouldn't have put up with that shit. Yeah. Takes a lot of strength. Okay. And it also takes a lot of restraint. Okay? Imagine what could be said or done by somebody of significance. But what are the consequences? Okay? More ire? Maybe. Okay? But trust fails, right? If we resort to intimidation, whatever, right? Um, this is important, right? So while the quote I led with was a dangerous man who chooses peace gives peace meaning, right? Because you can see it, but also the successful person who doesn't retaliate against really small people who are, but this is something that I mentioned to my youth students, right? Because we already know that if the student has been brought in by the parents, I have several, are brought in because of bullying, right? Want to empower the kid, give him some skills just in case things go physical or whatever. And so the kid goes back to school, and then the bullies, what they don't notice is the bullies aren't threatening to hit them anymore, but what the bullies are doing is calling them names, doing, weird ass karate shit, whoa, you think you're all that tough, whatever, right? And they're picking on them for doing this thing. And the next thing you know, the kid wants to quit. So we have a little sit down. Okay. And I don't demean the bullies. I don't, tell him he has to like suck it up, be strong, whatever, right? You just keep practicing, you'll be fine. One of these days you'll like teach them a lesson. No. Okay. I asked the child, I said, "You learning anything?" "Yes, sir." "Hard work, huh?" "Yes, sir." "Great." Okay. It's supposed to be. Um, what do you think is easier for the bully? To intimidate you or to call you names or to do whatever it takes to get you to quit? Because you do know that you bother the bully now, right? You've moved things from being a target to a target they're not sure about, and you might even scare them. So which is easier for them? To do whatever they need to do to get you to quit so you're now not a problem, or to come to the dojo and to do the same amount of work that you're doing to become the kind of person that you want to be, or to become as truly strong as you're going to be? Which one's easier? And you can see their eyes light up. Oh, you mean you quit? Yeah. Why would they want you to quit? Some know, most don't, right? I said, because you bother them. Okay. So as long as you train, they don't know what you know. You hold the power. Okay. And they don't have to know whether or not you're good at your skills yet, or which skills you're good at, or whatever. Right? So now you're starting to have choice. There's certain things you can do, but as long as you control yourself, right? Restrain yourself, everybody's going to see the difference. Okay. And then if something does happen at some point, you have your skills. After that conversation, I don't lose students that were going to quit because they were being bullied about taking martial arts. Okay. However, I think it would be very, very different. And I heard stories of students who were bullied, and then they punched the bully in the mouth, and then their parents or grandparents pulled them out of martial arts because martial arts was making them violent. It's very different. Okay. Kid gets kicked out of school, right? The bully's parents want to sue for damages, all kinds of shit. Okay. But the opposite of this power with restraint and the benefit to society is it is impossible to do anything of significance, even within the Bujinkan. Right? I take shots all the time. Hatsumi Sensei took shots for decades. If he'd have folded, we'd all be doing Taekwondo or something else. Okay? Everybody that has done something of significance, the Bushido guys come out of the woodwork. assholes of all kinds of flavors come out of the woodwork. Okay. Because of how many different reasons? Fear, resentment, you're doing something that they really wish they could do. Um, there's a belief among the weak-minded that if I push somebody down to elevate myself, I've still elevated myself. There was an emperor in ancient India. He converted to Buddhism at some point, but either way, his name was Ashoka, Asoka, Ashoka. At the edge of his kingdom, along all roadways, so you going down a roadway and you hit the edge of his kingdom, there is a roadstone. Okay, not really a mile marker, but there was a roadstone, and it had an inscription, and that inscription pointed out what he believed to be the most egregious act, the most the worst crime. And that was that if you needed to demean somebody else, you needed to push somebody else down, whether it was based on religion or status or whatever, then you were already lower than that person. And if it was about religion or anything that made people a better person, that punishment was also on the roadstone as well. The punishment was death. Now, granted, in ancient India, they believed in reincarnation, so you can always come back as something else or somebody else or whatever, cosmic do-over, whatever, right? But I think that people see that, right? That there's a difference between standing on the shoulders of great people to rise to higher heights, right? Because they've done work before us and all that. That's what we're doing when we train. We are standing on the shoulders of all past masters that have come before us. Right? They discovered way more. Okay. We're rediscovering things. And eventually we'll make our own discoveries. But to stand on the heads or shoulders of people, to hold them down so that we can appear to be or feel like we are higher, that's not the same. But either way, the Omote side of this is strength without intimidation, clarity under pressure, those kind of things, right? The warrior who waits, protects, and endures first, creates trust. That makes you a benefit to society. We have codes of action, and we have student creeds and things like that in the dojo. And one of the vows of intent, is it the vow or is it the creed? I intend to develop myself in a positive manner. And avoid, no, that's not the one. Which is the one with the self-discipline? I intend to develop self-discipline in order to bring out the best of myself and others. And I stop a student and go, great. How does you developing self-discipline bring out the best in other people? Okay. And often students will give me one reference that, if I develop discipline, that I'm a role model that other people can, follow and things like that. And I'm okay with that, right? But what I'm really leaning into is if you control yourself, you will gain much more confidence, trust, and things like that from other people. And you bring out the best in them because they're not defensive. They're not cleaning up shit that you've dropped behind you. They're not trying to make up for your messes. They're not your friends or family who have to help put out the same fires that we started, that kind of stuff, right? But at its core, right, we gain trust and confidence and whatnot from other people. Okay, but the Oda to this that really got me thinking here was, you have to be willing to take a hit, because you're going to take a shit ton, and the more significant, the higher you want to go in belt levels, the more work you do, the more time you spend with the teacher, whatever, right? Ones who are already there, ones farther along in the path, they're on the lookout for people like that, right? Success breeds success. People that want success for little to nothing, those are the ones who'll stab you in the back or shoot you with an arrow from a distance or ruin your reputation or other fucked up things. Anyway, so let's see. Got two more things to go into here. Have to do with ego and those kind of things. But questions, comments, James, we got anything that popped up since, or just for that last little piece there?
Just that Jared and Greg from Australia jumped on.
Awesome. Have I kept my promise so far that this was not going to be like a fluffy pep talk? You know, guys, you got to be willing to take a shot. You know, no, you either can or you can't. Okay. Take a couple. You'll figure out very, very quickly that we're more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And while the human body is easy to kill, it has to be approached in very specific ways. But one of my teachers used to point out, Reverend G.K., one of my first meetings with him, we were talking about this idea of being alive and living. And he said, there's a huge difference between a grave and a rut. You know what that is, Jeff? You know the big difference between a grave and a rut is? I said, no, Sensei. He said the dimensions. Right? And what he was pointing to is all these people running around, not really running around, right? I don't know, man. I'm not, I'm kind of stuck in a rut, right? I just can't get out of this thing. And so the difference is the only difference between a grave and a rut are the dimensions. Okay. And what that leads to is something else that he used to say, which is that a lot of people are dead and too stupid to fall over. Okay. So they're alive, but they're not living. Okay. And there's a huge difference. And they die or they're easily injured more often mentally and emotionally than they are physically. Okay. In the first of the Four Noble Truths, right? Without the proper perspective, life is experienced as a roller coaster ride. It's experienced as suffering, discontent, dissatisfaction, right? A whole bunch of words that dukkha means. But dukkha, this pain, right, this dissatisfaction, is broken down into three different types. Right? There's physical pain, which is caused by everything from age to illness to bumping into the world the wrong way, whatever. Right? There's mental pain, which is confusion, frustration, anguish. Thinking about things you don't want to think about. This also includes emotional stuff, losing somebody you wanted to be with forever, not having something or somebody that you think you should, whatever. Right? And then there's nature, right? And nature is the reality that, human beings age, metal rusts, whatever, right? It shit dissolves. But the reality behind all this is that nothing hurts worse than pain. Nothing hurts worse than physical pain, right? Anything other than that is a projection, right? We don't think about our sorrow and mourning about grandma passing until we think about how we're not going to spend certain times and relive certain memories and have certain discussions and her making me apple pie or whatever. my grandmother didn't make me apple pie. But it's the physical pain thing, right? And the rest of it is making mountains out of a molehill. But warriorship is supposed to be about enduring. Like there are no records that I know of that I've in my research or my teacher's research or anything of the bodies of warriors, whether they were depicted in paintings or described in writings or dug up. No bodies of warriors that had no scars. Zero. Okay. I understand. It's a natural proclivity to want to avoid pain and always run toward pleasure, even if that pleasure is I'm just going to lay around and people can leave me the hell alone. But that's not warriorship. Okay. Anyway, let's continue on with this before I put everybody to sleep. Okay. So let's dive into something else that he had pointed out in that little passage, which is training this in Keiko, right? This efficiency versus ego. Okay. So Hatsumi Sensei has always warned us, right, that in Ninpo, it's about this senbon mushadori, right? This ability to keep going, right? Senbon, right? This 1,000, right? Repetitions of any given technique, right? To keep going again and again and again without tiring out. Okay. Other teachers have described it like on a battlefield, right? I don't know how many of you actually have a live katana. I have one. It's called a Wind and Thunder. It is a 3-person sword. It is built like, and the reason I got it was because the dimensions are very, very close to the Kukishinden sword and the Takagi Yoshin sword. Very meaty swords, including the scabbard and all that, because they were built to also apply techniques. And so, did I just lose something? Sort of weird beep. James, was that you? Was that me? What was that? Did you hear that? No? Okay. Anyway, we're still on though, right? Yes? Everything's still going?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry, I just get a little touchy here because technology can do its thing. Anyway, where was I? The swords. Not the same as the alloy blades that we get as iaito for work in the dojo. Yeah, they're a little bit heavier than a boken. But there's a reason that we get like suburito, right? These big freaking meaty boken that are designed for cutting practice, but it's designed to build certain muscle and teach you how to neutralize the torque that's going on and whatnot, so you can learn how to stop it properly. But imagine moving through Daijodan, right? Or from Myusui or Geidan or Hasso, Tenchijin, whatever, right? Constant movement of that sword. Let's say you survived this battle. Okay. You will have been moving that sword around for upwards of 3 hours. You can't be. He made a reference to this is not the same, right, as chopping wood, right? That's not what leads to proper skill in Budo. Okay, great meditation. You still need to chop wood if you got a fireplace or a wood burner or whatever, right? That's a chore. But if that's the way the sword is being wielded or whatever weapons are being wielded, fucking burn out really fast. You're gonna get to a point where you're just like, somebody just stab me, please. Right? I'm done. Right? In which case, might as well have just committed harikiri or seppuku before you entered the battlefield. Fuck it, gonna die anyway. Right? but there's an efficiency to this, right? And so the goal is to learn how to do the techniques as though we would have to apply it 1,000 times. I know it's a lot of work. Who's got time for that shit, right? Anyway, so the point here is that students who lack patience force every rep, or if there's a fear of losing or a fear of screwing it up, right? Or they have to present themselves as strong or worth the rank or worth the next rank, right? Even more than that, right? They're going to force things, right? And every time they force a technique, they burn energy. They're breaking their timing. They're ingraining into muscle memory bad habits, let alone the fact that they're triggering greater levels of resistance and projecting tells to the opponent. Okay? I'm constantly warning students, especially upper level students. I walk over and go, man, it's a good thing your partner's nice. Right? Either your partner is not paying attention and they're just throwing the punch or the grab or the cut or whatever it is, and then just waiting for you to do the technique so they can do the brave fall and then it'll be their turn. Or they don't know what to look for. Okay? Because, and then I'll list, right? You're leaving yourself wide open, or you're telling, or that amount of effort and energy, right? Your partner's responding to not get injured because they aren't willing to take a cut either, right? So they're responding in a way to protect themselves instead of, as soon as they feel the thing that you're doing, countering it, escaping, resisting, reversing it, whatever. Okay? And at certain levels, the black belt levels, your partner needs to go from being an uke to a teki. Okay? Uke, one who receives the technique, right? Their job is to help you learn it, because what they're learning is the ukemi that allows them to survive the technique, the roll, the break fall, whatever it is, right? But that's not the same as a teki, Teki, teki. Teki is an attacker. At a certain point in training, the uke needs to be a surrogate for the attacker on the street. Okay, so their job now is to catch every fuck up that we make. Every time we tell, every time we signal, every time we go too soon, every time we go too hard, whatever, and that they could counter, they're supposed to do that. That'll cause some frustration, especially somebody who absolutely believes that they have the technique and it's down. But you don't have anything unless you can get it in on somebody who will proactively stop you from doing it. Because the reality is, the only person in this damn world who will let you do your cool move on them is your uke. Nobody else in this friggin' world is going to let you do those techniques to them. Zero. Right? Unless they're suicide by ninja. Right? That'd be cool. But anyway, right? Nobody's going to let you do it. Right? So we have to earn it. We have to figure out and eliminate tells that are caused by ego, tells that are not the physical actions are a reflection of what's going on the inside. So hesitation, whatever, ego-based ones, frustration, imperativeness, like I got to get him first, fear of losing, all kinds of things. Okay. We have to eliminate them. Okay. One of my teachers used to say, sometimes two is uke, but outwardly. I said, you need to be like a cat. You need to be like a kite in the wind. That whichever way the wind blows, whatever happens here, it's perfectly fine. Okay. As a matter of fact, that's one of the feelings behind Jumonji no Kamae. Whatever you throw at me, I can handle. Okay. Whatever you want, it's okay with me. because I don't have any preconceived notions. Okay. I may have a plan, but I also understand certain things like no plan lasts first contact with the opponent, right? So adaptation has to be the key to everything, right? But I can only read so much. Ultimately, you're going to do what you do as the attacker. Right? You're going to do what you do. So whatever you throw at me is perfectly fine. Okay. Anyway, so deeper than this one, as we're looking at efficiency, right? The person who paces themselves, who senses the opening, right? Who breathes through each repetition is the one who can keep going when it counts. Okay? Which is why we teach breathing, we teach reset, those kind of things, because shit's not. We have to remember that the kata is not the fight, the uke is not the attacker, and the dojo is not the fight environment. So the more we can do to close the gap without actually putting ourselves in harm's way. I mean, I've known some people that every Saturday night I go out and get myself into a fight so I can hone my skills. You're a retard. Because you're also risking the morgue, the jail, removing yourself from the lives of your family members who depend on you for provision and safety. And so, anyway, I mean, if they're single, I don't care. But if they have responsibilities, then I do. And that is reflected in my association with them. Anyway, so the core parallel here with this being willing to be cut, right, is the willingness to be cut isn't just moral. It's not just this ethical thing, like I'm willing to take a hit, right? It's tactical energy conservation. Okay. It's also a trap. Okay. So the Uda to this, right? Being willing to take a hit, being willing to get cut. This is easily as confusing as the warrior accepts death. Right? That doesn't mean that the warrior wants to die. That means the warrior understands that by virtue of being a warrior and stepping in to protect, fighting the battles, stepping up to do this grand thing or whatever, right? There's a really good chance that, right, not going to make it through the 3 hours. Okay. It's not the same as I wore myself out and then I've got nothing left but to quit. Right. It's, good chance I'm not going to see my family again. Good chance I'm not going to see home again. It's the exact thought I had sitting on a C-130 transport on the way to a little tiny island nation called Grenada one year, staring at the opposite wall, the fuselage, running through training scenarios and a plan to clear that freaking door and what I should be looking for and where I'm going to go, given that the plane doesn't get vaporized in the air or, turn into a whole bunch of little tiny metal parts on the runway as we go burning in. I had to resolve myself to the fact that I signed up for this. Okay. There's no point in thinking anything. Was there a fear going on? Were there some of the abso-freaking-lutely, right? However, so don't think that I was cold like, no. Okay. But I reminded myself, well, this wasn't preferred. Otherwise, you'd have signed up to be an infantry person. Nothing wrong with the infantry people. You guys go out front, and I'll be the MP directing you to the front lines by all means, right? But ultimately, shit hits the fan. We're all infantry, even the cooks. So, but I had to remind myself, look, I know you signed up for these benefits, and you signed up to do this stuff, and this is your primary job and all that. But ultimately, you signed up, and so once I got myself past that, then I could think about tactical operations and those kind of things. Okay. But the willingness to get hit means that I will wait longer for the punch to come in, the grab to cinch down to hold me in place, the kick to come into my body, the cut, whatever. I will wait longer before I move. And when I move and his body has to respond to the expectation of the shot landing, and all that happened was a grazing shot or it just what the hell happened, and now the body's trying to catch itself because mentally, emotionally, physically they overcommitted. You got them. It's a trap. Those who are not willing to take a shot, those who are afraid of getting hit, those who and I don't listen to what people say. I don't care what the words are, because the body tells. The flinch response, all those things, they tell, right? Just like they told on me until I got my shit together. They tell, right? And so those who move early, he's going to follow you if he can, right? Those who move stiffly, yep, you may move, but he meant to cut you, he meant to kick you, he meant to hit you, whatever. So he missed with one without even thinking. He's chasing down the new target. So if we're too stiff, then we can't move out of that spot. So great, we won a battle. Now we're going to lose the war anyway. Right? So, right, one of the things that I don't care if we're aiming for success. I don't care if we're aiming for a black belt level. I don't care if we're aiming to get out of the fucking rut we're in. I don't care, whatever it is. We have to be willing to take the hits. We have to be willing to get dirty. We have to be willing to take cuts. Sometimes those hits and the shit that we have to put up with is from our own ego, because the biggest fear is getting out of our own comfort zone. Well, I'm not comfortable in this position, Sensei. Well, you must be, because not you. I'm talking to the unenlightened people. Or you'd make different decisions, right? Every time we stop ourselves from doing things, and I don't care what the reasoning is, right? It's those people over there that are corrupt. It's those people over there that hold everybody down. It's the unseen faces that, which leads us to the next piece. In chapter 3, Hatsumi Sensei talks about life of perseverance. The very first section: people who cannot bear life do not live. What hit me the most was, and this was written in 98, 99, or at least this particular version of it, right? He just kicks people right in the nuts first off, especially people that want to be warriors, right? Sensei says, this is an age of crazy price fluctuations. People have fallen head over heels into the mire of inflation because of the surging economy called Jinmu Keiki. This is something that was going on in Japan. Many people are in despair and losing direction, are they not? I have no desire to dwell upon these people or sympathize with them. I think there is a wonderful opportunity to develop your life in spite of these circumstances by making the best use of shinobi, perseverance. We have to reflect upon this age of the disposable while we enjoy such material abundance. What he's pointing to is, I have no time for people who bitch and complain. We're shinobi. We are warriors. Figure it out. Okay? The more time you spend bitching and complaining and moaning and pointing fingers and scrolling to, because of course, they didn't have, we didn't have cell phones to this degree. We didn't have smartphones back then, right? So what we didn't have were fucking algorithms that kept track of what you watched, what you read, how long, and all that, and then fed you more of the same. There's click word for you, right? To keep reminding you that your belief or view of reality was indeed true. Look, here's more, here's more, here's more. Even though there are all kinds of examples of people in the same condition or worse who are doing better. How's that fucking possible? Because their focus is on finding a way to finding a solution to surviving the battlefield No matter how many hits they take, no matter how many cuts they take, if they don't die trying, they're going to make it. But there's so many, and I'm sorry to say there are so many in this art who talk a good show, but are content in their circumstances. And a lot of them have positioned themselves to either bark first so they don't take a hit, they minimize the number of hits that could come in, right? Because let's face it, most people are just going to stop fucking talking to them. That's what I do, right? That's what Soke did. Whether it's through avoidance or just nodding and smiling. Oh, yeah, you're right. Right. A lot of people are going to agree with them outwardly because they don't want more shit coming from the person. Right. Because it's just like a merry-go-round. It's the same freaking few stories, the same few beliefs or whatever that just keep coming out again and again and again. Okay. And other ones, they're comfortable enough. Right? That these other things would be nice. It would be nice if I could do that. That'd be cool. I'd do anything to be a black belt. No, you wouldn't. Not you. You guys are enlightened, right? But everybody that I've ever trained with, I have heard somebody at least once, right, approach them. There's always been somebody who has said, I have always wanted to train with you. I've wanted to train with you for years, right? Of course, they were with me in an organized thing that got him to Japan or got him to this seminar or whatever, right? Did all the travel around, whatever, right? It's something, but introduce them. Always wanted to train with you. Well, I have wanted to train with you for years. Or I've always wanted to be a black belt, or I've always right? And every single teacher has either said, obviously not, or not enough, or, I'd give anything to be a black belt. Apparently not. They don't need this extra student who's now pissed off at them. Well, I'm going to quit because, and especially back like during the ninja boom, when we had fucking hundreds and thousands of people coming to this art. If you think a teacher got pissy or scared because a student's like, well, I'm just going to quit. You're not treating me well. There's a whole fucking line behind you. Most of them aren't going to cut it either. But go find something that's going to make you comfortable. People do it all the time. They find teachers who tell them what they want to hear. They join churches or they jump churches because they don't like how that minister who's supposed to be teaching the word of God, right? Well, that's not coming across the way I want to hear it. So I'm going to go over here because they're just, right? That's how we find friends. It's how we surround ourselves, right? With people who tell us what we want to hear. That's the ego side of things. Okay. Anyway, let's see. He goes into the country, all that kind of stuff, right? So he lists a whole bunch of things about things that were going on in the world at that time. People are living in discomfort. However, the ninja had no problem within these conditions. If they do not have a large amount of material goods, they manage to live with a fresh approach to life. Furthermore, if people give up pursuing material goods, they can return to a more humanistic society. In fact, I'm rather glad to see the current world situation becoming chaotic. By the way, what guidelines do ninja use to live? Question mark. If you were to cut upon one limb, you could still act by using your other limbs. Likewise, people have to use substitutes for economic power. Goes into since Japan's economic power is weak in material goods, right? We should strengthen in other ways. Okay, goes into a bunch of things about Japan this way, whatever, right? People who are proud to be cultured and learned and act like nobility are nevertheless the first to fuss over a mere oil shortage or whatever, right? Most countries have social safety nets. People aren't living in poverty. And if they don't like the conditions, they need to change their condition or learn to operate within those conditions so they can live at a higher state. Again, this sounds cold. This sounds like, Sensei, you just don't understand. I let off the goddamn chapter with Hatsumi Sensei pointing out he himself had no time for people like that. Okay? Maybe it's that the teacher understands and the person who's saying they don't doesn't want to understand, because part of the comfort zone is, as long as I have these beliefs that justify why I'm here, then it's not my fault. Maybe. Okay. People who are proud, let's see, how impatient these noblemen are. Please notice that I am not pointing out people that are uber rich and whatnot. Okay. I'm talking about people that they are proud to believe that they know all the answers, right? They're proud to believe that they're the ones doing the research, right? They got all the answers, but they fuss as soon as something is off. So they fuss as soon as they can't do something easily. Well, then perhaps the toolbox didn't have the right tools in it. Okay. So he points out how impatient these people are, right? Is this real human nature? Isn't this the time to make an effort to endure hardships? This very section right here, right? Out of Wisdom for Life, points out that our best opportunities for not only practicing endurance, but to also practice using the skills that create success out of adversity are during shitty times. It is amazing to me, and it has been amazing to me over my career in this art, how many people want to be training in the art of enduring and persevering, ninjutsu, but they want to do it in the most comfortable ways. Not willing to travel to train with a teacher because there's no dojo where they are, not willing to do whatever they have to develop the skills so that maybe they could be the person who sets up the dojo in their freaking town. They want to earn a black belt and they want to be a teacher, but how long is that going to take? As fucking long as it's going to take. Depends on you. Right? Not you, because again, you guys are enlightened. Right? Again, not a pep talk. Sorry. Okay. So let me just wrap this up here. There's an internal progression, okay, from timing to intuition. Okay. And this goes along with that, moving that last second timing, trapping them, that kind of thing, right? This is not about technique. It's about timing. It's about distancing. It's about angling. It's about assessment. It's about paying attention. As timing refines, sensitivity grows. You begin to know when to move and not necessarily just what to do. When to move and when not to, before the attacker does. Right? This is part of those sens. Right? Gono sen is reactive timing. He attacks. I have to move based on his attack. But the better we get, we lean into sen no sen. I move based on his intent to attack. That changes everything. And then there's sen sen no sen. I move before he even thinks of attacking, but he's considering things. Right? Till eventually you get to a point where you're not predictable. To them, you're not predictable because they're trying to assume that you act the way they do. You think the way they do. Right? And so you're never in a good place. You're never in a good position. Or you have, because of the way you handle things, because of the way you let, like water off a duck's back kind of thing. You don't let things stick, not easily frustrated. You don't respond to their bullshit attacks and whatnot, right? That comes across as being way more strong than the person who puffs out their chest and throws their shoulders and, threatens to throw hands. Okay? So this is the first gate toward Saki, toward Kuji, and the deeper intuitive levels of Ninjutsu. Back in the day, we used to differentiate between inward-based and outward-based meditation. Inward-based meditation, most people understand that you're not only internal and like Zen and things like that, but you're mindful of your own inner workings, your thoughts, your emotions, your breathing, your movement, that kind of thing. Right? It's about you. You're the object of meditation. Outward-based meditation, we called sensitivity. And that's where we worked on paying attention to and syncing with and being intuitive, that intuitive sense to danger coming and the preparation for the fifth dan test, right? Saki, the force of the killer, the Saki literally is murderous intent, right? Kuji is the level beyond Saki, where danger exists, but no intent is being projected. These are the real nefarious motherfuckers in the world, right? These are everything from the cold-hearted sociopathic assassin who projects no intent. They just walk up and stick a knife in your kidney or shoot you from a distance or whatever. Danger exists, but it's not being projected, right? Kuji, there's also a level called Juji as well, where between Kuji and Juji, where the vibes are there, but it's not, right? For something to be Saki, right? It's already underway, right? I'm sure most of you have heard, like in the realm of workplace violence, people often talk about like, I don't know, man, he just like snapped, right? He just like, no, very rarely does anybody ever just snap. Okay. In the realm of violence, there's two perspectives. There's the target / victims, where it just looks like violence is random, or jackass just uh, just snapped, right? So we don't know when something could happen, what it's going to look like, where it'll be, how many attackers, what form it's going to take, whatever. Or jackass just snapped. Okay. But that's like really shitty awareness. Okay. From the perspective of an attacker, though, attackers rarely just like snap and then just go like ape shit. Okay. They've spent quite a bit of time thinking about things, planning them either in detail or rough sketch. Doesn't have to be written down, could just be in their head, right? Every time they get pissed off, right? How they would do things, and they might even have considered what, where, responses and things like that might happen and whatnot, right? So I just mentioned this not too long ago that the moment that it looks like somebody just snapped, they didn't just snap. They didn't just snap. If anybody follows Mark McYoung, uh, he and I often contribute things back and forth, or I'll share his stuff or whatever. And he had posted something about these people just snapping, or they threaten to attack, but then they don't. Right? Don't write that off to the fact that it's not still just brewing in there, right? But what I said was, it's been my experience that the moment that most people think of as the attacker just snapping, they didn't snap. That was the moment they chose to stop holding back. It's not a snapping thing, right? That's what it looks like to people who aren't paying attention. Okay? But being able to pick up on people who there's no directed intent, right? They're not looking to murder or whatever, but there's an underlying just poison or lava that's just going to take the right conditions for the eruption to occur. Okay. But all this stuff leads to, right? But we're never going to get there if we're not willing to take the shot, because if we're not willing to take one that's actually going to land, like James, how often in class do I just stand there and stare at a student or an uke who pulled their punch or redirected it so that it missed because they thought I was going to move? Happens quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't move is because I can feel that they're not going to land it. Right? When we can get over the fear of the fist landing or the sword hitting or whatever, to know that there is something that drives it and knowing whether or not it will land based on their intent, that's a whole different level. But the only way to do that is to be willing to take shots and get really good at last second evasion, to where at best it'll be like a grazing shot. Or sometimes I tell students, sometimes just stand there and take the shot. Right? Are you nuts? No, you got to keep your partner honest, because your partner was taught by the same kind of mom and grandma and whatnot that you were, that nice people don't hit. So unless you can find a good uke who's willing to land the shot, I don't mean they're going to be like, an asshole or whatever, but they're there to help you. The most compassionate thing an uke can do is not pull their damn shot. Otherwise, they're helping you develop a false sense of confidence, which will get you killed. Okay? So training's not easy. Okay. So in closing, and then we'll open it up to some questions if anything pops up, right? What we're really looking at becoming, right, based on Hatsumi Sensei's teachings, Takamatsu Sensei's teachings, a bunch of other masters from other lineages as well, right, is becoming the warrior the world needs. Okay, this is I have this in a lot of my promotional materials and things like that when I'm promoting things out for the dojo to local adults and whatnot, right? I lean into this warrior protector ideal, but in long form, it's becoming the warrior protector that your family and the world need you to be. Right? Just like the term leader. There's a whole bunch of people running around with leader and warrior name tags, implied or physical, literal, right? Shihan, all kinds of shit on their uniforms and stuff, right? They don't have a leadership bone in their body. They don't have a fucking warrior bone in their body, right? They could grow one, but it's going to take a lot. Okay. So here's the lessons I pulled out of Hatsumi Sensei's training. We're not training to hurt people. Okay? We're training to become capable of restraint. But you're not capable of restraint if there's nothing to fucking hold back. Okay? So when he talks about these things that had to do with like compassion or I'm not teaching you how to be violent. I'm teaching you how to live. Those kind of things, right? The people on the side that got involved in training because they want to be more violent than they already are. They just want to be better at it, right? Or sneakier at it or whatever. It's not talking to them. Hopefully it'll get through. One day they'll wake up, and hopefully before some of the arrogant individuals who have been following me for years. And years ago, we had conversations about how they couldn't control themselves. Somebody called their mom a name or whatever, they'd have to, fight, right? They couldn't help themselves. And now they sound much more wise, but they have to admit that they're more wise now because, well, they're old and they're broken and they can't fight the same way. Well, see, that you didn't make a choice. That's not a choice. You woke up one day and went, fuck, I still have the tiger inside, but I'm going to, right? That's problematic. Okay. So, good news is, right? Hatsumi Sensei has always been teaching us to be warrior philosophers, right? The warrior's there. As a matter of fact, there's another spot in here, and if I don't know that I can find this thing right off because I didn't dog ear it, but it's about the perception of the ninja. Maybe I can find this here quickly, because this is another punch to the ego quickly. Let's see, is it there? Maybe. Let's try that one. Maybe from Ninpo to Ninjutsu. Anyway, I'll paraphrase here quickly. He describes the ninja, the genin, right? He just describes the character that everybody's attracted to, right? The movie character, the rolling and the leaping and the cutting and the shooting and throwing and all that. And then he says, this is the lowest member of the clan, right? They've got all these tricks and stuff like that, but that's not that's not the real ninja in the ideal. That's not the person that has the time or the wherewithal or even the inclination, right, to become more refined, to become someone who can hide in plain sight in the world, right? Their hiding in plain sight is always in disguise. Right? It's like kind of like the superhero, right? Every superhero wears a disguise. Spider-Man, Batman, all these guys, right? They put on a disguise, so nobody knows them as the superhero. Who's Superman's disguise? Now, it's hard to believe that he put on a pair of glasses and a three-piece suit and he was invisible. However, Clark Kent is the disguise. Okay. He has his superpowers. They all have their superpowers all the time, right? But it's different, right? I think one of the points he was making in that particular section is that far too many people aim far too low, right? They're satisfied by the tricks. They're satisfied by the trappings. They're satisfied by the allure that will die with age, that will keep someone in the lower levels of even society. Because everything is about the thoughts are always about trickery. The thoughts are always about disguise and impersonation, about manipulation, about in the upper levels. The manipulation happens in the target's mind, in the mind of everybody around us. Okay? Because they're going to think the way they think. They don't have to guide it. You remain invisible by not telling anybody anything, right? By acting like everybody else. But again, that's why we have all these other lessons too, right? The upper level people in ninjutsu surround themselves by upper level people in the world, in the art, right? Not by people like them, by people who they want to be like. And they carry themselves a certain way, and they ask questions that are of a certain quality so that teachers and or mentors or whatever pull them in and are willing to share things that the masses do not get. To be the warrior that the world needs, we have to be more like the kind of person that the world needs. Bad news is this path isn't glamorous. It requires hardship. It requires sacrifice. And it requires the willingness to endure criticism and danger and bullshit comments from asshats. Because what we're looking to do here is something very significant. If you can stay committed to this path, actively committed to it, that means more than showing up for a podcast once a week. Right? You will find yourself in a very small group, 1/10 of 1% of the entire population on this planet that is able to commit to something wholeheartedly long term with constant progress. Okay, not just like putting on a tag. All right. And I'll stop there. So, because I just thought of an incident that happened yesterday, but we're gonna leave that alone. Anyway, let me pop back over here. So, James, questions, comments, complaints? Sensei, you're still just fat, old, and bald. Yep, I need a haircut too. So, now that my hair get like this, my head looks bigger than it normally is. Anything? Questions, comments?
Yeah, there's a few questions in here.
Okay.
Chris McLaurin asked, being willing to take a shot, is that the same as being willing to go blow for blow or toe for toe?
No, I'm not sure when you signed on. The willing to take a shot before you give one. This is about developing patience. It's about developing clarity. It's about developing resolve. It's about knowing when you even should. And as far as going toe to toe, I mean, come on, man, we're ninja, right? Poison their water supply. No, it's thinking about consequences and those kind of things. Yeah, ultimately there's going to be situations, and again, knowing when. So it's not the same as, but it's related to, right? Willing to go head to head, but that misses prior lessons that we've had. Please remember that these lessons are not done in a vacuum, right? This is episode 255, which means there's been a whole bunch of lessons that came before this. And this is not divorced from or separate from lessons that come out in Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday or in any other program that we have. They're all linked. All of these things are like jigsaw puzzle pieces. And one of those other ones was a ninja never engages directly head on, right? It's always indirect, right? I say always because we're talking about 99.8% of the time. Those times that we do, you have to understand the consequences, right? You will be identified, you will be targeted. The consequences are much greater, but only when we don't have a choice. So the question is, how do you go about doing it? I think I mentioned that earlier on. What was in what segment? Hold on. When we were discussing efficiency versus ego. Okay. The willingness to be cut isn't just moral. It's not just a philosophical kind of thing or whatever. It is a tactical energy conservation move. It's a tactical choice, right? All things considered. Okay. So when? Okay. If I'm going to teach this person a lesson, well, then that's an ego-driven kind of thing. Okay. That person may need a lesson, but is there a way to do it where you're not as exposed to the same degree? Right. Think evidentiary trails. Right. So I've had students in the past that thought it was cool to wear jikatabi out in public and do dumbass shit. They were given a choice. Stop doing that. I'd prefer if you stop doing the dumbass shit. But if you're wearing tabi in this area, all tabi prints lead back to warrior concepts. If you're doing dumb shit, and that, see, it wasn't just tabi either. They would tell people where they trained and all that, and then they would pick fights. Well, they were kicked out of the dojo because you are bringing unnecessary harm, danger, whatever, legally and other ways to the members of the dojo, and ultimately to the art and my teacher, which is unacceptable. So I told one guy one time, one of us has to go. And since my name's on the sign, it ain't me. Now he's lucky he left my office because he came in and closed the door behind himself and then started issuing threats. I think I was rather restrained, because the downside to me duking it out with this guy was a win-win on his side and a lose-lose on mine, regardless of who won the actual physical battle. Which is why I don't spar with jackwagons when they come in and, let's test some things. As close as it's ever gotten is me sliding a liability waiver across the counter to them and explaining very clearly, right? If I win, you can sue me, or even try to turn it into something criminal. If I lose, you get bragging rights. There is no upside for me. So I don't do this as a game. Anybody that goes out sparring to test things out, right? It needs to be arranged with the like I've sparred with guys in other arts and stuff like that to test mine, to learn from them, to share ideas and stuff like that. But somebody walks in cold off the fucking street and says, just like to spar with you and try things. No. Because very quickly this will not be a sparring match, right? There's got to be rules. It doesn't matter. Okay. If I win, if you get hurt, you can sue me. We live in America, or wherever you live, that the laws might be the same. Okay. If I lose, you get fucking bragging rights. That affects everything, all the way up to the art, my ability to take care of my family. No, it is a win-win on your side and a lose-lose on mine. Anybody who does not have the ability to assess that things at that level, they're not shinobi. They're not even thinking in terms of Budo. They're thinking in terms of movie or story, glamour, samurai kind of things. James, didn't we just talk about that last week when people toss around the term samurai, right? My first question is, what era are you talking about? Because samurai had different fucking jobs and different roles in different eras, right? But everybody imagines this fantasy thing that might have been wrapped around Bushido, but at certain eras, they held government office positions. At other points, they were low-level freaking bodyguards, maybe, right? At other ones, they were guarding the door, and that was the same name, samurai, right? Remember, samurai means one who serves. So how is this person at this level with this title serving during this era? It's not the same. Which is why I developed the Nijino Hachimon program, right? These are minimum 8 areas for training that were determined in ancient Japan for determining who was and who wasn't doing ninjutsu. We've had a decent number of people go through that program. Some were impressed, like, holy shit, I didn't know that there was so much involved in ninjutsu. However, other ones, right? What's our promise? Before you start doing something, it'd probably be a good idea if you knew what the hell was involved in that thing to make sure you weren't being lured around by your left nostril or right testicle just because it had the word ninja attached to it. Or warrior or bushi or whatever. Anyway, Chris, you can do follow-up questions to that later if that means anything. For a lot of folks, I mean, the other thing that throws most people off is that mostly what goes on in the dojo, because of time constraints and whatnot, is Budo or Ninpo Taijutsu. So it just looks like we're just doing fight stuff just like in every other martial arts school. What's not seen is the other 95% of the art. That makes all the difference. And when Budo becomes your religion, and you become more of a religious, philosophical, spiritual person because of the Budo, and it continues to nurture that, it's like you've come full circle kind of thing, right? Most accomplished Budo masters that were battlefield warriors and whatnot and survived long enough ended up becoming artists. They became philosophers. They became Hatsumi Sensei was a bishop in Tendai Mikyo and was the abbot of a monastery. That's not the cool part, though, right? When was he throwing shuriken and killing people, being a spy in China? Yeah, I understand, right? What else?
Trinity asked, could Saki also include those that don't mean to cause harm, but, quote, accidents happen, the feeling of danger coming, but no driving force or foul play?
No, that's Kuji. Kuji, and I don't mean these. I don't mean that as Kuji. Kuji, as in it's a level of sensitivity. Somebody's screwing around near you and whatnot, not paying attention to what's going on, and you get this sense that whatever they're swinging around or whatever is coming at you. Or you're at a ball game and you just handed your friend the hot dog or whatever, and there's this right balls flying, right? You move and ball almost hits you and stuff, right? That's if there's a ball coming at you that projects murderous intent, I don't want to live in your world. And I love you, and since you're my daughter, I'd still like to come and visit, or you come and visit, or whatever. But if you're in the weird, you get the idea, right? So no, that's different. That's Kuji. Since I described that a bunch of years ago, even if somebody is punching you, right? Like one time at one of the Shadows of Iga ninja festivals, a bunch of years ago, he was trying to describe this Kuji thing, and we all just kept confusing it because the only term we knew was this Saki, right? This you're detecting danger, right? And he, to make a point, right? He had Stephen Hayes get behind him. And he said, "Whenever you're ready, just punch me in the back of the head." And so Hayes did, and Soke shifted and whatnot. We're like, "Oh, and he goes, "No, it's not the same." And he turned to Hayes, Sensei Hayes, and he said, "Did you meant to hit me? You meant to punch me?" "Yeah, but only because you told me to." "Okay, but you didn't mean to hurt me. You didn't intend to damage me or anything like that." "No." And then later, Sensei Hayes was telling a story like, I'm fucking terrified. I mean, if I actually connected and knocked this guy to the ground, what the hell was that going to mean about the art and him and all? So there was the reverse of murderous intent. There was the like, "Oh God, please move," kind of thing, right? So, but that was the point that Soke was trying to make, is that this was not a demonstration of Saki. This is beyond Saki, right? Danger existed, but he wasn't projecting any intent. As a matter of fact, he had the opposite thing going on, but danger still existed. So I think that's more what you're leaning into. What else, James?
Kevin Hartwell over on YouTube asked, do you have any students training in other styles, and what are your thoughts on training in two different styles at once?
I do. I've had many students over the years, some doing Tai Chi, some doing Tang Sudo, Mudu Kwan, all kinds of things, right? So my thoughts are do what you need to do. Now, my thoughts also are, as a matter of fact, one of my students, he trained up until, I don't know what he's doing now, but what was Mike? World Taekwondo champion, 2010, I think. Then came to train with me for a while. Michael Weingart's. You can look it up. So associated thoughts are, it's not what I think about you training in multiple arts. It's what another teacher might think if they're uber protective of whatever. Okay? One thing I've learned about martial artists is we're highly competitive. We're very judgmental, right? And if not tempered, we can be very egocentric, right? What I mean by that is a student saying that they want to try something else out, or train in this other thing, right? It's almost like an insult to, when I say our, I mean generally speaking, right? I tell students at a certain point, right, you need to go study other systems. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to train in it, but you should become familiar with it, because you could run into somebody who throws that shit at you, right? That stuff. I don't mean shit in a bad way. I mean, they could throw that kind of stuff at you. So that's on one side. The other side is that at some point you will have to decide what your primary will be, because that's how everything is going to like associate, right? I tell students at a certain point, if they lean into Ninjutsu, what'll end up happening, because of the way we approach things, principles, concepts, and those kind of things, I don't tell students to forget anything they've ever learned. This is not a this or that kind of thing, right? I did a freaking virtual encyclopedia of martial arts before I got involved in this one. And so I was told the same thing. Don't forget anything you've ever learned. It's not that we don't do those things. It's that the context in which they're done will probably be different. So we used to call it ninjanizing. Okay. Like there's still certain conditions where I'll do a back hooking, like an axe kick kind of thing, but I don't do it the way I used to do it, because it's too fucking obvious. It's too, I have to be really fast and really tricky to get in on somebody or whatever. And it's the number of people that have been in martial arts that have not seen that, right? So they've got some way to handle it, right? I tend to do them as a bailout for, like, if I'm throwing a front kick and I miss, quick pivot, hook that heel back and catch a kidney or their spine, and then get the hell out of there, kind of thing. So, but that's what I mean by ninjanizing things. So I don't have a problem with it. And it actually gives me, James, we just picked up Alan like 3-4 months ago. I know, longer than that, 6 months, give or take. And he's been training in hardstyle karate systems since he was 12 years old. So if anything, he's having a problem between like all the tension and stuff in that one, and trying to relax and drop tension to be more adaptable in what we're doing. So he's doing his best. But people that have other martial arts experience, I actually find it easier to convey certain concepts, because I can say, do you know how, like in this, right? You right? This is like that, but it's right. And so it gets them there faster. I also appreciate that if they've been involved in martial arts for a long time, just like my teachers, many of them, it's not that they had favorite students, but they tended to lean into those of us who were military, law enforcement, that kind of thing, because discipline, and if we were, told practice this guy, we would go and do that, right? We studied more, but we were also long distance students, which means that when we came in, we weren't living in the local area. So when we came in for seminars or stayed for an extra day or 3 and did classes and stuff, we tended to pay attention more in class, because we didn't have the benefit of falling back on, if I miss it today, I can get it tomorrow. We want to be very, very clear, get into our notes, because we're going to have to train on our own until the next seminar or the next visit. I'm still the same way with training in Japan. So, but anybody that's, stuck it out in any given martial art and made it to a black belt or multiple levels of black belt, it speaks highly of their level of discipline and commitment and stuff like that. So do I have a problem? I have the opposite of a problem with folks like that. James was in martial arts for a bunch of years. Right. I think you started training in your teens or early 20s, right?
Yeah, in my teens.
Yeah. So no, I'm way okay with it. The problem isn't with me. It's often, and I tell people the same thing if they went from one Bujinkan teacher to and they want to train with me or whatever. You need to have a conversation with that other teacher because I am not in the business of stealing students and I'm not getting into a pissing contest with another instructor. My tiger claw will meet your eagle talon. Fuck you. Anyway. Go get your claws clipped. Anyway, what else? Anything else? I love that Saturday Kung Fu Theater shit. A lot of people believe that's the case, though, man. If like two martial artists are walking in opposite directions on a road, they meet each other. They must fight to see who has the best. Now you win. Okay? If you have a problem with me, man, that's a bigger problem. That's the thing too, where people think that Ninjutsu is a martial art like other martial arts. No, no. Okay, where are you camping? Yeah, you're always going to be camping near a water supply. You need it, right? So I'm going upstream. I'm gonna drop the poison in the water, and you're gonna fill your canteens with it, and there won't be a fucking fight. That's just right. Or I'm going to set things up so that while you're looking for, whatever, you're going to have to deal with somebody else because, they got a chip on their shoulder too. You don't fight the same way. And it's not about cheating. It's not about not fair. It's not, we just don't think about things the same way. It's not about being tricky. Okay. You can't trick somebody in a way that they won't fall for it. This requires way more fucking brains than brawn. Not that the fighting doesn't happen, but no. Anyway, what else we got?
Greg said intuition is a wonderful power to have.
And it's not only for the ladies. Okay? Women's intuition. Okay. I don't discount that they're picking up on information that guys have to train more for or aren't as sensitive to. Like women are way more, I think their olfactory, their sense of smell is like 100 times sharper than ours, which means that they pick up on pheromones and other chemicals that you release as the endorphins and as the internal chemistry starts to change when somebody's in a certain state, right? Has to do with peptides and certain types of chemicals that affect the cells as we change states and whatnot. I think that they could pick up on stuff like that. They're naturally wired more for interpersonal relationships and certain subtle levels as to how people are getting along and how that maneuvering happens and stuff than guys are. We have to train hard to pick up on things that I think they're just naturally in touch with: facial micro expressions, body language, vocal intonations, shifts that way as well. Yeah, but intuition, absolutely, right? And the big thing in that kind of training is in knowing the difference between the intuitive sense and paranoia, and paranoid projections, or being able to separate out things like transference and a bunch of other things that go on where it's fucking guessing, right? As opposed to really picking up on vibes, right? Anyway, what else?
Maui said, "Amazing KUDEN, thank you."
You're welcome. Thanks for being in, and thanks for being like, I don't know when you jumped on, but some people are part of my, I don't know, we'll call it the inner clan or something like that. They're just on regularly, and if they're not on, they're binge listening to the recordings and That's how we get some of our best students, right, James?
Yep.
Early on in the conversation, like, I've listened to like almost all of your things, or I've followed all these things, and so it's like I don't need to convince anybody like about signing up or anything like that. We just have a discussion about their goals, their sticking points, that kind of thing, and here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I require. Here's what's involved in these different programs. Which one, they just need to make sure there wasn't something they hadn't thought of when we book that complimentary coaching call to discuss training. And even if they don't train with me, they still walk away with one or more suggestions for next steps for their own training. Because I'm not a good fit for everybody. I'm just not. Is that it? That's all we got?
And then
James, would you like to train at some point? Love to get you into the class.
I might stop by tomorrow. I'll try it out.
Fantastic. Class at 6, does that work for you? 6 o'clock work for you?
Trinity said, boy, is it stressful and anxiety inducing, the whole interpersonal cues thing.
And then I'm sure being right-brained and creativity-minded isn't helping either. So, and then a psych major, right? We're all insane at some level, so I'm sure you're subdiagnosing people on a regular basis, and we're all, I don't know that we're all eccentric. You know the difference between eccentricity and insanity, right? Size of the person's bank account. Poor people are insane, and rich people are eccentric. What else? Is that it?
Technicoec said, thank you. And she said it's a whole soap opera up here.
No doubt. Yeah, my daughter's in DC. Oof. Right? She's wading through the swamp on a daily basis. Anyway, she didn't give me another reason to panic, but like one of my daughters was in at a school in Pittsburgh when the whole 9/11 thing happened. And like everybody knows now, like that plane crashed outside of Somerset, which is actually where half of Trent's family lives, like the grandfather's side of the family. But the very first reports was that plane was brought down just outside of Pittsburgh. It was not identified very clearly. So like that school that my oldest daughter was going to was just outside of Pittsburgh. And when I was trying to make the phone calls, things were just ringing through like the place had been abandoned, or it could have been just messed up or whatever. And so Dad was in panic mode. And then that night where the plane and the Black Hawk helicopter collided in DC, right? Like trying to get messages through to my daughter, who's sleeping soundly, I'm sure. She let me know the next day that she was fine. But, problem with dads that care, I tell you, just what the hell, especially living far away where you can't do the thing, which is why my kids didn't have a choice. They had to learn. I don't like to go to class. Well, you have fun while you're in class. I have to. Yes. Yeah. I know. I'm mean. I get it. Okay. You can roll your eyes all you want. Okay. Because the older you get, it's my responsibility. I've taken it very seriously. It's my responsibility to keep my children safe in the world. And the older they get, the less time they spend with me. So they had to train. Because the less time they spend with me, the more time they are responsible for their own safety. So I'm not one of these parents that, well, I don't want to tell my child no, and I don't want to force him to do anything he or she doesn't want to do. Bullshit. Parents make their kids do at least half a dozen things every day whether they want to or not. And those who don't are letting a kid walk around the world with a shit-stained ass and whatever, right? They make them wipe, they make them brush their teeth, they make them, there's bullshit. Parents make decisions based on their comfort level. Not the ones that keep their kids with me long term or whatever. There's very specific tool sets they're trying to give their kids, whether they can do it or they've got to get somebody else to do it. That is the lamest bullshit. I don't want to. Well, if you don't want to ever tell your kid no, well, at some point, even if you're the nicest parent, you're going to transgress, and hopefully you can work your way through it. But it's no different than being a leader, no different than being willing. And this is right in there with being willing to take a shot, being willing to get cut. Because if you're always fucking caving, if you stand for nothing, or if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. Or if you're okay with everything, you stand for nothing. It's a huge problem in today's world. Okay. People are not willing to draw a line in the sand, and they're not willing to drink the blood of their enemies from skull cups. I have a t-shirt that says almost exactly that thing. My wife knows me so well. Not a big t-shirt wearing person, but there's certain t-shirts that she gets me. James knows. I wear them to class. Just to be clear. Anyway, is that it? Is that what we got? Not trying to push anybody away, but we're coming up on 3 hours.
Dave just said artists get to claim eccentric as well. LOL.
Yeah, but they're never famous until after they're dead. So, I did want to mention that. Izuka Sensei just passed. I think most of you already know this. As a teacher that I trained with on a regular basis, he's the one that always reminded us that every time we come to class, we risk dying. He was still old school, right? As a matter of fact, one of the, it wasn't a joke. It was a very serious thing. Anybody wanted less than what he was offering, or piss and moan because something hurt or whatever, the usual response was, you can always go train at home, boo. Right? And that was not wasn't a slight to Hatsumi Sensei, but anyway, he just passed. But remember, Hatsumi Sensei, like all these guys that have passed already, Sano Sensei, Oguri, now Izuka Sensei, these guys were all like in their teens, early 20s when they started training with Hatsumi Sensei. He is older than them, right? He's not going to be around for very much longer. Okay, we all have to accept that. Well, you don't have to do anything. However, my point here is less than altruistic. If there are any books or whatever that you are thinking about getting that Hatsumi Sensei has written, or DVDs or whatever, by hook, by crook, used, new, whatever, you better scarf these things up, because the assholes will come out of the woodwork the day he dies. And a book that's $30 now is going to be $300 minimum. They will milk it for everything that they can get. Just like when an artist dies, that's when their paintings become valuable. So, as much as that sounds dark, I am not a nihilist, right? I'm not somebody that wants everything to just fall apart. I'm not an optimist. Okay. I'm a realist, and this is based on experience. Okay. So when his books went out of print, and every once in a while, somebody who hasn't trained in fucking forever and decided to clean house, and James knows, right, puts their books up online and whatnot. Tell me I'm wrong that they're not, like, if they're double what their original face value was, you're getting it cheap, right? So forewarned is forearmed, and I'm not somebody to tell you that I told you so. So you will not hear me say that later. My words will just ring in your ears. I won't need to say it. Okay. As much as I hate that to be true, I'm sure there's a bunch of people right now waiting like fucking vultures to pop their stuff up on eBay when they can get 3, 5, 10 times the value. So make it happen. And I don't want to hear any fucking excuses. Figure it out. Or stop talking about it. And again, not just my words, right? I've had certain mentors, right? It's in print, right? By all means, get the book, right? He would pat people on the head and he would smile and nod and say, I understand, right? And then he would go on to the next person and discuss things with them or whatever. If you think that he dwelled on the problem that somebody, since I, really want to, but I can't, I understand, I'll give you a little lesson or whatever. And then, okay. And it wasn't that he wasn't a caring person, right? His job, any teacher's job, is to make you stand on your own damn 2 feet, right? Because I don't think people really get this. And this is where I'm going to wrap this up, okay? Take this shot. Take this cut, okay? The teacher you choose and your choice, it's really fucking important. Some of you have heard me say this before. I'm going to say it again for the benefit of everybody. In the realm of Budo, in the realm of survival, whether you have ever thought about this or not, if you're a teacher, okay, I hope that you're not one that leads with ego, because we put our lives in our teacher's hands. Our students, for a teacher, put their lives in our hands until they are able to do this for themselves, until we are able to do this for ourselves. Got to make sure that the teacher we chose isn't some jackwagon who's just getting off on a power trip. Because what we're learning, what they're teaching, our lives may depend on. Our families' lives may depend on. Okay? I tell my students this all the time, right? Don't take this lightly. You're putting your lives, you're putting your lives in my hand. But you know what? I'm also putting my life in your hands. Okay? I have to teach you correctly. And before you think that this is something altruistic, it's also very realistic. I may, let's see, James, you were around for this, right? I broke my back. There was a car accident that I was in. I was like whacked out for a while mentally and physically. I wasn't sure if we were making it back to that point. I could be in a condition where I have to rely on one or more of my students to protect my family. And if what I taught them was fucked up and my family gets injured as a result of it, not from the student, but because the student didn't have the stuff right, I have to live with that. Okay. So we need to drop the egos. We need to drop the bullshit fantasizing. And this is also in the realm of the hits and cuts we need to take. Right. Sometimes we need the teacher to nurture, and sometimes we need a teacher to kick us in the ass. Okay? And everybody that thinks that, well, I can just learn this stuff on YouTube or whatever, those people, I don't know what connection you have with them, right? You can learn moves, but you're really only learning like 10% of the move, because what you can't see, and I tell students this in the classroom, you're in the dojo, still only learning 10%. You can't see inside this skin bag. You can't see the muscles that fire as they fire. You can't feel and sense my balance as I'm moving. You don't know what I'm looking at, what I'm thinking about, how I'm assessing, nothing. Even if I describe certain things, you're still not in there to recognize what's happening. There's a lot you have to figure out. So if you're only learning things to learn the step-by-step moves, I wish you well. Okay. All right, that's it. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. James, thank you very much. I appreciate it again. So hopefully you'll actually be a show for class tomorrow. I get a lot of people that say they want to train, but then, they don't show up for class. James is my student. When did you start training with me? Jesus.
I think
It's over 20 years.
2006 or so.
Holy shit. So almost 20 years. What the fuck is wrong with you? No, sorry. Anyway. Anyway, all right. I will see you tomorrow for class. I'll see, let's see who else was on. Chris was on for class. So anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow. What are we working on tomorrow? We might end up doing more Hicho. I'm not sure yet. I think I'm going to stick with the Senundo Enundo drills and the Uke receiving things because it's time for people to be taking some shots, recognizing that they're not going to be able to block everything and avoid everything. And, so, all right, that's it. I will talk to everybody again next time. Be safe. And I'll see you either on Whiteboard Wednesday or in class. Right. And if not, I'll talk to you next week on our next episode of KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at online